now. And we've been doing these WeSTART online meetings and gatherings for over a year now, since the pandemic began. And this particular, let's say, flavor of what we're calling WeSTART online meetup is about community gathering. And the idea here is that we are all somewhat experts because we're all part of this community, and we all have things to share about what's been going on in our practice or in our collaborations. And we sort of loosely asked some people in the community if they would like to share a story about best practices, we could say. I guess we put in the advert that this is about new strategies for collaboration, things that people have developed probably or possibly due to new working constraints of the pandemic. And we really want to learn about these new techniques and what they might be able to provide others in the community with ways of working together, maybe online or in other capacities, maybe blended, like we do in education, and we're calling it blended learning. Perhaps there's a way of blended collaboration. Or those who've looked at our collaboration toolkit and used it, and trying things differently than they've done before. So today we have invited, well, we invited people, and a couple of people came forward. So we have presenters, we just went through this, Ania and Dejha, is that right? Who are going to talk about their work, and they are, I have a little blurb here, two critical contemporary voices on digital arts international stages from Clot magazine, and LGB power couple from Flaunt, and they are a LA-based experimental artist duo whose practice merges environments, technologies, and performance art rooted in the understanding that immersion is not only a physical state, but also an emotional and psychological state. Their approach employs nuance with scale, focused on producing a feeling instead of a spectacle. So I'll let them get started, and then we'll have a bit of questions, and we'll move on to Jessica Smarsch, and then we will have some questions, and then we will open it up to the rest of the community. So without further ado, ladies.
Hi, thank you, Camille. Thank you, Lucy, and thank you, STARTS, for having. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. I'm just going to make you the presenter.
Okay, great. Thank you. Cool. Thank you, STARTS, Lucy, and Camille, for having us. We're very excited to be presenting today. Again, I am Dejha Ti.
And I'm Ania Catherine. And I have to say, with the LGB power couple, Dejha brought me this water in a mug that says wifey that my sister gave me. And it's just so ridiculous. I have to call it out.
That's all. In case you're thirsty throughout and just have no other choice but to drink from that cup. So yes, in addition to having a collaborative practice and experiential and digital art, Ania and I are also married. So I know we only have 15 minutes, so let's jump right in. I'm going to present. Can you see my full slide screen?
No, I'm going to make you host, and if you can then make me host after, that would be great.
Okay.
Yeah. We are the host now.
Great. Fantastic. Okay. And now?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, great. Fantastic. Okay, so when STARTS had asked about new strategies for collaboration, Ania and I have just finished a project. It was a London Fashion Week presentation for a brand called Mithridate, Chinese luxury brand. We presented in the fall. Oh, is this letting me? Yeah, we presented their collection in the fall at the Serpentine Galleries in London during London Fashion Week to basically bring together a immersive and experiential fashion show that kind of replaced the catwalk.
It was like zero catwalk. Instead, they were like, present our collection through your art medium, which is usually immersive performance installation. So that's what we did. And here's a little bit of documentation from that piece.
Right. And sorry, the navigation on this is a little bit strange. So when we had been asked to do the presentation for London Fashion Week for AW21 back in February, at first it was going to be more in a sort of concept store, sort of fashion and medium, but then with Tier 5 lockdown, that presented the challenge of how do you present a collection during Tier 5 lockdown in London. So all of London Fashion Week went digital, which was interesting because, you know, some brands in the past have decided to present their collection in an all digital format. We saw Balenciaga's video game, for instance, is an example of that.
But the standard is usually a fashion film, which is what we saw still very much in the traditional format with the catwalk showing all the pieces. And we were thinking, considering that we were going to make an experiential artwork in the form of a concept store installation hybrid, but still wanting to make it an experience even though it was going digital. We took that as a challenge to say, what would digital experiential look like? What avenues and tools are available to us to make this? And we decided to attempt that. And what we're talking about today is the finished product.
Yeah. And I would say before, we would like to show you a short snippet of a video, and I'm pasting the link in here for you in case the connection is bad, that you can look at it at a later time. But I would say overall, you know, this was very much it's so interesting, sorry, it's like giving me weird navigation, a challenge-driven collaborative project, which is really, you know, we pulled this from the STARTS tool set that we were reviewing. And I think this is a really interesting entry point for us, because here we're presented with, we have to present a collection, right? And we have to present it to an audience. How are we connecting the two of those, and what is the vehicle for doing that? And so I would say very much this fashion presentation was through the lens of digital and experiential art, which is our practice. Let me just share with you a video, and I hope that this plays okay. Flag me if it's just not working at all.
Last night, I dreamt of machine thinking.
Automatiste is a browser-based and experiential work which showcased Chinese luxury fashion house Mithridate's Autumn-Winter 2021 collection at London Fashion Week. The title is derived from the French adjective that describes the surrealist automatism method for creating art, in which you don't consciously choose what you're doing. Instead, you create without thought to see what arises from your deepest self. The experimental website hosts a journey of free association through the protagonist's subconscious inner workings, dreams, memories, and non-memories. The audience participant encounters a generative, non-linear narrative that weaves live-action footage, 3D worlds, machine learning interpretations of the collection, performance art, portals to an immersive 360-degree lookbook, real-time poetry, sound, discoverable QR codes, and smartphone filters for further immersion. Automatic processes and charts operations were utilized in the creation of the work, largely by building systems of trust with the machine and relying on it as an active collaborator. What looks like abstract moving and still paintings are GANs, which are created by inputting collection images into machine learning models. AR and XR filters are discoverable by rotating 3D objects. One filter transports the guest into the protagonist's darkroom. Another allows you to wear the GAN lookbook iteration on your face. Live action footage rendered through the AR and XR filters creates unexpected footage results, 360-degree CGI immersion environments, allow guests to freely navigate distant worlds. 3D and 2D scenes were carefully architected, sometimes mixed with live action footage. It's ambiguous whether the imagery is created by a computer, humans, or both. The spirit of automatic art extends to the interactive design, as there are innumerable video and real-time subtitle pairings and sequences. Game theory is applied to aspects of the experience: tokens, portals, limited time in certain spaces. Subject to the machine's subconscious, the memories unfold differently every time. You can never experience Automatiste the same way twice. Automatiste was featured in BBC Click, Fab magazine, Harper's Bazaar UK, Electronic Beats, Twin magazine, and the Contemporary and Digital Art
Fair.
Last night, I
Sorry.
dreamt of my
Okay, cool. I'm gonna admit someone who's trying to get in. I hope that's okay. So yeah, just to go back to our presentation, that just gives you a quick overview. And for us,
And it plays some of the music, which you're not going to hear in our presentation, which would have been really sad.
yeah.
So
If we look at I would say there's this word anti-disciplinary. The new museum has been using that a lot. This is a term that I think is really interesting, that it's not just about taking many different disciplines and having them collaborate together, but it is defining an entirely new discipline. And I think that is really exciting for this project for us, because when we set out to do the project, we weren't like, okay, here's the reference for what we're going to do.
we weren't aiming for a specific form, and we had no idea really what we had a clear idea, but we also weren't aiming for a certain thing that was like this other thing that already existed. What we knew was what we had available, who our collaborators would be, the elements that would go into it, but how that all came together was kind of making it, the form was like taking shape as we were making it, instead of having some clear goal, which I think makes it different than interdisciplinary, where it's a clear blend and mix of how everything's going to go. Everything really evolved together.
Right. And there isn't a template for how that collaboration goes down and how
Right.
that process goes down. So it's like, what we could tell you is that our early framework for the project was, okay, how do we make this accessible to the majority of people? This is very interesting to us because, you know, traditionally Fashion Week is very VIP. It's not accessible at all. And so kind of making accessible that front row of the runway, I think is very, very interesting. And so anyone with desktop web browser and a smartphone can experience this, but their presence really, really matters, meaning that you can experience the same automaties the same way twice. It involves your participation. You have to be an audience participant. So without you, it really just doesn't play out, and there's nothing, the system just doesn't work without any input into the system. So, you know, the two sort of basic components when we talked about the early framework was a web browser experience that was interpreting the collection and its core themes, as well as Instagram AR filters. And we had built out, you know, roughly, let's make an interactive narrative navigating through 25 screens.
More like a non-narrative.
A non-narrative, totally. And then, you know, having discoverable QR codes to pull up the filters that they then can be used as an additional layer on top of the screen. This we felt that we could get away with because of Zoom culture. Everyone has their desktop as well as their phone on standby at all moments. So we were playing to the advantage of the tech that people have on their desk. So here you can see original, this is like very early on schematics. One thing that we wanted to do with the lookbook is make it so that it was more something that wasn't easy to access, but it was more of a treat, and it was something that you had limited time with, and it only appeared in certain moments where you had those little portals that you had to like press and hold to go into. So this is very interesting to us because it encourages curiosity.
And we're also not trying to kind of like make the whole thing about the literal clothes where it's like you're shoving the details of the clothes in the face, but instead of painting a picture of the world where maybe these clothes were born, and then when you get the chance to look at the garments, you're more curious about how all of this is coming together and actually is drawn from a coat or a pair of pants or a scarf. And I think that that was probably helpful in making people want to see the clothes more versus being forced to like stare at them so literally. So that was something interesting that we were trying to play with, how to increase interest in seeing the garments and seeing the lookbook imagery through an abstracted overall journey.
And I would say that, I mean, the importance of this conversation is the collaboration. And as you saw on this grid here, you know, the different sort of disciplines and the different sort of areas, pulling from game theory, innovative interfaces, performance art, filmmaking, machine learning, programming, 3D architectures and 3D worlds, information architecture, and also I think a huge one here is entertainment and entertainment industry production, not as a craft, as a way to organize all of these different parties. I see that we have a past collaborator, Julian Rad, here joining us. And I think, someone like him from this industry where you have experiential marketing sort of machines that are able to take all of these different industries and put them together and make them create a singular experience is really, really, I think, valuable to COVID pandemic collaboration and what we've learned there. And I think people—
And the art world has a lot to learn about supporting more complex digital projects, that it's going to need to kind of learn some of that know-how and infrastructure and structuring of large scale teams to pull off bigger things, as people are expecting more innovative artworks also to start popping up.
Yeah, totally. And we worked across 7 time zones: Los Angeles, Istanbul, Shanghai, Berlin, London, Rome, and Washington, DC, Baltimore, the East Coast as well. And, this was a 2.5 month project, extremely complex, a lot of moving parts, and all of it was done remotely. This isn't really entirely foreign to our practice, given how multidisciplinary we already are, and requires us to work with many different people across the world. But here, it really did open up. We're like, well, if we don't need to have everyone be in London, then we get to open up our cast the net wider to the talent that we really, really want.
The very best person for this, regardless of where they are, which is amazing. And I think that's a benefit of purely digital collaborative team building like this.
Yeah. I think also, I know that we're short on time, so we don't want to get into too many details, and I'd rather hear what people would like to hear more about, or open up a conversation about this and other people's experiences as well. But yeah, I think just the process and being very organized on how to even practically, produce a project like this, being organized with endless spreadsheets and Q&A ticket lists and such like that. These kinds of tools that always kind of we've taken for granted, but at this point become a very, very key to the process. I think we went through the project, even through that video. We weren't sure if it was going to play, so we put together slides about the project independently. Is there anything else you want to review within the project?
There's maybe a couple things. One, which is I just wanted to show, because it was kind of a quick video, that this is, for example, one of the 3D environments that you can see. And also we had written 25 kind of subtitles that were each randomly paired every single time. So not only was the order of the film clips and the screens that you would encounter randomized, so it's different for every single person, but also the pairing of subtitle to film clip is also randomized, which is interesting because it really gives you, if it's a certain vibe of a subtitle, it makes you view that clip differently. So there's really so many variations of variety, even going through the same link, or 2 people having completely different experiences or takeaways. So here's some examples of some of the film and subtitle pairing. Again, the 360 immersive 3D lookbook, where you could navigate all around. If you clicked on any of the images, it would go full screen, so you could see the look, and then also is mixed in their GAN generated imagery of the lookbook. So here's a little bit of that. And it's a 3D, obviously. And then we would also run our live action footage that we shot through the AR filter. So then we were kind of using the Instagram filter on the footage itself to kind of add another layer to the live action footage. Here's another result of that. And then here's a combination of the GAN generated lookbook with live action footage, where you have these parallels where you're seeing kind of the literal and the more interpretive at the same time. More of those 3D. And here is the way that a lot of it is not showing the clothes exactly. So we just wanted to call out here that we took things like this pink fluffy coat in the collection and decided that the mountains in the 3D environment would have this pink fluffy texture. So everything, even if it seems really abstract, is actually always going back to a theme or a motif or a visual aspect of the pieces.
If you just pause right there, and what
I love the fluffy mountains.
the fluffy mountains, but also that we got to build our protagonist an entire, home.
Yeah, we built her home. We got to design her home with our 3D team of like, where does this woman live?
And so Ania and I's practice in the physical generally is quite massive in terms of like footprint and scale, and it's something that you can walk inside of and completely surrounds you physically. And it was interesting, we would never be able to afford this in real life. So it was interesting, like how we could think of building new terrains for our projects that like expand beyond that, even conceptually, like tying to the textures of the mountains that tie to the textures of the clothes and such. So yeah. This is another screen. This is part of these like sort of like 3D objects that can be found throughout the space. And if you click and drag them and hold them and turn them, you're able to reveal QR codes that you can then scan with your phone in order to bring up the Instagram filters that you can use on yourself at that time or later, or on the art in front of you in the experience as well. So you kind of have this additional layer on top of the desktop experience. How are we doing on time? Should we wrap?
Lucy?
It'd be good to start letting people ask some questions shortly, if that's okay.
Yep, totally. I think, and this is the other filter as well. What's interesting about this, and this was mentioned in the video, is that the designs that you see, they are basically the inputted collection images and textures from the lookbook itself, and fed it into machine learning models that we experimented with and tweaked, and that produced and generated still and moving imagery, which is, again, so you can see here that we would take, hundreds of images. Here we just show a few, and it would spit out what looks like a very like organic painting, and then that we put into the AR filter in Instagram as well, and you would be wearing the machine learning collection version on your face.
Really useful.
But I think we've
and there's some more of the GAN generated images from other pieces, which is, I love how these turned out.
So yeah, if there's any questions, or if we want to move to the other presentation, Lucy, you let us know.
No, I think we should actually do some questions first. We'll do like 5 or so minutes of questions, because I think it's really, really interesting work. I was just about to write in the chat, but there's an element of horror and the grotesque in here as well, which I find really interesting. So do people have questions? You can either unmic yourself and ask the ladies directly, or you can put your questions in the chat. But this opens up some really interesting ideas around the future of fashion shows, and maybe even questions the purpose of fashion, I suppose. But really interesting. So questions, people?
I was curious about, because you said that a lot of the scenery was coming from the inspiration from the clothing. And was there also like a bigger concept that came from the clothing designers of how they came to, the materials? And was that also a part of how you like generated the images and sceneries?
For sure.
Yeah, so the designer was basically thinking about being in lockdown and kind of wanting to go into like a fantasy sort of realm, the magic of the imagination and the absurdity. And then we took her original inspiration, because she wanted these like really exaggerated large silhouettes, like strange pairings of colors, unexpected like scale and all of this. And we took that and we wanted to like use it as a base, but also take it in our own direction, which we came up with surrealist automatism as like the way, of course, to reveal the subconscious and reveal all this magic, wonder, depth, and landscapes within the imagination through automatic art. So that was kind of how we took her original of the imagination and drove it into diving into the subconscious to reveal everything that's there, and took it that way.
Brilliant. Anyone else want to ask some questions?
Lucy in the chat has said, I don't know if you want to say this yourself, Lucy, but she's asked about great way of making fashion shows more inclusive, and did you get any feedback or evaluation on types of audience and who was engaging with the work?
No.
Not necessarily. I mean, we not from like a marketing research. They went and like performed an official survey that our expertise, I suppose, stops there in terms of that. So we didn't perform any analysis in that way. But what I did think was interesting is that there was a ton of sharing immediately online on social media, specifically Instagram, because of the AR filter connection. And it was like when we set the site live after working on it for 2.5 months, and we were like up all night, like, let's tweak this little thing. Let's make this a little bit. And then we put it live, and then immediately it was on people's stories, them experiencing the desktop browser experience through their phone as well. And it was just interesting to see how quickly it made its way throughout the world, and in different, people were interested in different aspects of it,
Some people were just it was fun. Some people just on their stories would take one of the subtitles and be like, love this, and we're like, that's so funny. We weren't expecting people to just take the subtitle and be like, I really resonate with this phrase. So it was fun also to see the different things that excited people and that made them want to share the experience of being at the show or being part of the show by using the filter.
And I see there was a few questions regarding the link. I put the project page link just in the chat now that plays the video and gives them more imagery and description around the project. If you want to take a look.
Can I ask you, ladies, what do you think this will, what are your thoughts about what this will do for fashion? Because I know when I first saw it, I thought, wow, this is taking what people, some fashion designers, when it's done well, do really well, which is going way out and making more of an artwork than making fashion. And so taking it to the nth degree. But I think what you've shown here is that fashion is art, or could be art. And so I wonder what you think that says about the future of fashion, if anything.
I don't know. I mean, there's so much reinvention happening in the fashion sphere, also in digital, with digital garments, and like the huge conversation about fashion and the impact of the environment, which also thinking about this project from that angle, which is everyone like building large sets and people flying all over the world and doing all of that to make a fashion show, versus this one existing, through Zoom and the internet and data, and streaming, of course, has its own environmental footprint issues. But I don't know. I think also Mithridate being this is like, I believe their 4th collection, being a younger brand, I believe that they felt like they could take a risk, because it's very hard to break through the noise by just having beautiful clothes. And even if the clothes are absolutely stunning and the designer is a Central St. Martin's graduate and she's super, super talented, Demon Zhang, it's still hard to, break through. And I think taking a risk like this, like allowing digital artists to interpret your collection and show it in a new, innovative way, is a way that can kind of help people break through the noise by not going the traditional route. So maybe it's that experimentation is helpful when you're trying to make sure the world can be introduced to what you do.
And just a follow-up question, because we're meant to be talking about, collaboration and, crossing disciplines. And you talked about adisciplinary or adisciplinary, sorry. I've heard of adisciplinary, so I guess I got in my head. But I guess I'm more interested in the process of how you worked across disciplines, because that's a lot of what's primarily what STARTS is about, is how do we create bridges, and sometimes that's in individuals, because individuals can cross many boundaries, disciplinary boundaries, but also just being able to have conversations about what the work is going to be like, and how to work together on a day-to-day kind of communication level, those kinds of hard things that people sometimes don't talk about.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I would say, you know, how Ania and I start any project is to really investigate and interrogate what the concept is before we create any design process or sort of aesthetic judgments or aesthetic directions, or how we technically want to do something. Before we even consult what technology we want to utilize, we first are very close to and intimate to what the concept is. So
like chance operations was used in the process of making this because of the idea that the subject and the concept is around automatic art. So we like used automatic art to make it. So that's a way that the concept kind of determines the process.
Right.
And we encouraged our collaborators also. We spoke with Tony Cruz, who did the music, and he was like, I'm a little bit delirious, so like I don't know about this. And we're like, literally, if anything just comes to you, even if it seems absurd and like off brief, if it just like hits you in a random moment or you're in a particular mood, like put it in there, whatever is kind of like happening. We want everyone's flow. Everyone's like, I happen to think of this twinkle. It doesn't match what you said. Like throw it in there. Let's see kind of what happens.
But
So
at
that was
this,
fun.
yeah, and that's kind of the fun sort of defined sandbox, go improvise within that sandbox kind of aspect of it. But you know, given all of the moving parts, this was a very structured project as well. And so after we go through the conceptual phase, Ania and I make very detailed design documents, and we say, okay, here's our website, and here's our website architecture, which I showed you earlier on in our presentation. It was a first stab at it. It was something that was a living document that we changed over time with our 2D designer, our web architect, and it was a work in progress. So we very much work in a schematic, like what is, given that this is going to live largely on a browser, how does that architecture look like? And then what kind of content types are going in, right? And we know we have 3D worlds, we need a 3D team. We know that we have XR filter, we need XR, developers and artists, as well as machine learning interpretations of the lookbook. We need machine learning programmers. And so as we define what the content types are that are going into our website infrastructure and our network infrastructure, then we start to build our team around that is custom to what the architecture that serves the concept is. So, having a lot of structure, and the reason I showed you that document of all of our live documents is that, here is like our Q&A ticket list. Here's all the subtitles that are turning into a CSV file that's being pulled, in by our live server. Here's the directory of links for the X amount of videos that are kind of the computer and our algorithms kind of shuffle in different ways for the user every time. And all of that was all of our designs were on digital tools and sets. And if anyone wants the list of tools that we use, I'm happy to just email me, dejha@operator.la. I'm happy to share some of that with you. A lot of it is open source, some of it's proprietary for a small subscription. But I think, this type of unsexy organizational stuff is was really, really important in making something extremely experimental, which, when you look at the output, you're like, that it feels
whimsical
and it feels experimental, but there was a very rigorous, schedule. We had, like I said, entertainment, fashion, experiential marketing producers who were just like, this is crazy what you guys have decided to do in this timeline with this amount of people around all over the world. And here is your multi-tab spreadsheet schedule that doing meetings for us, because we are the directors and the artists of the project, having pretty much
24 hours a day meetings.
Yeah.
Our one team would go to sleep and then the next team would wake up. So it would just coffee all hours of the day. People were going to sleep and waking up, constant check-ins.
Yeah.
It was a lot. Fun.
Wow. Okay, great. Any other questions or thoughts or anything from anyone else Oh,
I
we've
have
got
one more question. Can
Yeah.
I hop in? I was just wondering, what is your fluency with some of these technologies? Or are you really more coming as like a conceptual designers, artists? And do you need to have fluency with those technologies to have those conversations with your teams?
That's a great question. So Ania and I, I'll speak for myself first. So my background is in human-computer interaction and immersive art. So I have a long history designing systems and overseeing technical teams to execute them. So this is anywhere from like large-scale fabrication, taking like 3D design renders and making sure they're fully realized with the right materials and like the right timeline build with like technical installs of, sort of physical computing elements that intertwine and sort of interface with physical environments. In this case, this was entirely digital. So in terms of like building work streams between all of the media departments, as well as designing the technical system, that was all done by us. And then we appoint the sort of experts who know much more about these areas than we do. So for instance, we worked with Immersive Kind to execute our vision for machine learning. So while we aren't machine learning experts, we
know how GANs work, and we know what goes into it.
Yeah, and I think it's totally. And I think it's like really, Ania is constantly studying computer science as well.
Because my background is in choreography and performance art. And I also direct films. So like I'm more in the body, flesh, performance. And then I think both Dejha and I identify as conceptual artists too, but me coming with the performance art, choreography, film background, and Dejha more in the technical interactive system design. And I think it's really crucial, not just in this project, but in all of our past projects, like your ability to speak to programmers and not just be like, I have a vision, and then like ask someone to figure it out. But like so many of the details of these projects are where the art really lies. So if there was such a huge gap between having an idea and a vision and then people asking to do it and not really knowing all the micro decisions that happen in the technical process that actually end up influencing the work in a lot of ways. I think it's crucial to have some version, even if it's elementary, to be able to communicate and make sure it's going to match your vision.
100%. Yeah, I think, having a basic understanding and studying, I think even if you're the worst programmer in the world, it's better to at least try and fail, and that's okay. But then you understand, when I'm working with a programmer, this is what the process is like. So I do think, while you don't need to be the expert or completely fluent within all the different mediums of technology that you might be interfacing with on a project, a basic understanding in order to lead a team and also understand,
and empathize with their processes as well.
Yeah, and learn and investigate. It's a constant for us, a back and forth conversation about, okay, is this possible? When our knowledge runs out, we rely on the partners. It's really about finding the right collaborative sort of team who is, one, willing to collaborate, one, willing to experiment. That's huge for us. But yeah, I'm trying to, Lucy, give you the host.
How do we
do that?
Get rid of our host status?
If you go into participants, click on participants, and
there
then you go to me and you go to more, and then it should say make host.
Make host.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks. That was great.
Thank you. That was.
Have any more questions?
Yeah, fabulous.
Yeah, of course.
We will also put this on our, as Lucy said at the beginning, on our STARTS socials, and possibly a link on our main website. So it sounds like there's some really great tidbits of wisdom that we want to share with the community from you guys. So I think you might get some more feedback at a later date, so don't be surprised.
Great.
Fab. So we'll move on to Jessica. Thanks for your patience, Jessica. I'll just do a little bit of a bio, and then you can take over.
Okay.
So Jessica Smarsch is an internationally recognized designer who collaborates across sectors to bring beauty, creativity, and enhanced user experience to technological, scientific, and industrial innovations. Her 3-year project, Constructing Creativity, has been supported by 3 EU art tech grants, where Sustain, the Worth Partnership Project, and Reframe. And that's what we'll be hearing about today. And 2 of those are STARTS projects. So take it away, Jessica.
Okay, great. So, yes, so I am going to frame the presentation from the perspective of, designing with science and technology. And more specifically, I would like to show through my work how cross-sector collaborations can lead to enriched outcomes. So as Camille said, the project that I'm presenting is Constructing Connectivity, and it's a person-centered stroke rehabilitation method. And of course, I'll get into all the details of that. But I wanted to start with the mission statement, which is to use beauty and creativity to sensitively engage stroke patients in a multi-sensory healing process. And even though it wasn't worded that way from the beginning, this really was what was driving the project throughout the 3 years that I've been developing it. And I just wanted to take a moment to break this down a little bit. Because, first of all, so this is a project that's working with stroke patients. And, this is a very serious topic. These are people that have a serious medical condition. And so, when we talk about having to learn this language, I mean, that was one of the first things that I needed to be very serious about, was educating myself about what it means to have a stroke, what are, the current methodologies that are used to help stroke patients recover, and also, what are those experiences like for the therapist, for the patients. So that was the first understanding that I needed to make with the project. The second highlight I want to make is this multisensory healing process, and I'll get into more what that means. But in short, the idea was that we wanted to take input from the body and translate it into multisensory feedback. And we needed to do this through some kind of input-output system, and we needed to employ technology. We needed to gather input from the body and somehow translate that and give a feedback. So the idea was, to combine these 2 things. And frankly, we could have just stopped there. And I would say that a lot of innovations, a lot of solutions, especially in the medical environment, are combining a scientific question with a technological solution, and that's the product. What I find really inspiring about working in this area is how art can bring beauty and creativity into the conversation. And I hope that you also see through the presentation that this combination can indeed lead to enriched outcomes. Okay, so I wanted to start with this idea of mind-body connection. This is a topic that I've always brought into my projects even before I started working on this. And, for me, what mind-body connection means, it's about, not thinking about ourselves as segmented parts. We are not one part heart plus liver plus brain plus skeleton, but in fact, we're a system of organisms and cells, and all of these things are working together. And how can experiences engage the whole body, the whole person? And what's also interesting about, especially if we talk about stroke, that we can also talk about mind-body connection in a very scientific way. And stroke is one of the most obvious ways to illustrate this, because a stroke happens when either a blood clot or an explosion of blood in the brain creates the neurons cannot get oxygen and the neurons start to die. And then the neurons cannot make synaptic connections between each other. And that's how the neurons communicate. And what you see is then the body starts to lose functions. So a stroke can cause the loss of speech, the loss of vision, the loss of movement. And all of this, there's nothing wrong with the body. It's all about the brain not being able to make the connections and communicate with the rest of the body. So that was very interesting beginning. And all of these conversations started because at the time when I was applying for the first STARTS grant called WeSTART, I was introduced to a neuroscientist named Raymond Vanet. And in the beginning, someone introduced us and we didn't really know, if there was something to combine our work with, but we started getting into this conversation that was very interesting. And also Raymond's work, and this is really coming back to that multisensory aspect, Raymond was showing through his work that if, for example, a movement is paired with a second sensory feedback, for example, an audio feedback or a visual feedback that makes sense with the movement, that this attracts more neural attention in the brain than if you would just perform an exercise. And when there is more neural attention attracted in that area, it creates a higher chance for these neurons to make new synaptic connections. And that's exactly what a stroke patient needs in order to regain some of these body functions. So that was the first sort of, connection that I made cross-sector, let's say. And we applied for this grant together with a partner, Vention Technologies. And so we started the project. So we knew that we wanted to collect information about the body, movement, let's say, and somehow translate that into sensory feedback. So this is part one of that process, the how we collected movement. The idea in order to be able to collect as much information from the body was to create some kind of, wearable garment. And so I worked with a couple different companies, and I will say at the beginning, I really had no experience in this area. But I worked with a couple companies who were sort of dabbling in it, and we did experiments. You can see the first ones, we worked with printed silver ink on textiles. And that was taking muscle energy and bringing it to a processing module. So there was another company I worked with that was developing a processing module. So this was processing the information from the muscles, and it also had an IMU in the module, which means it could also track movement. So these were the first experiments. They were a little raw, but it was a great introduction at least. And you can see the first prototype was just kind of a basic t-shirt design. You don't see any of the sensors from the outside, of course, because they're all on the inside of the sleeves. But the shirt was designed to have this detachable sleeve so that we could, recycle the parts, for example. So this was the first part of this feedback system is the, collecting information. The second part was giving the feedback. And that's what you see here. So, and here I bring back this idea of mind-body connection, but now I'm looking at it more from the idea of an experience. So through developing this app, which was also something that I did with my tech partner, Vention Technologies, we created this app and it translated the movements and the muscle energy from the patients into visualization. So for example, you can see on the left that we could translate muscle use, range of motion, and rotation into these visualizations. These were calibration exercises that the patient would do every day so that the app could understand how well they could move and then tailor the exercises to meet that. But actually there was much more that we could do with these inputs. We could create outputs with almost endless variety. So here you just see in the middle a picture of someone doing exercise, a pretty simple exercise. On the right, you can see, the features of the app, basically quantifying the results, letting them share their creations in a community, and also connecting with a therapist. And what I want to show here is just kind of an example of all of the different kinds of potential, outputs that you might be able to make. And this is really just like a sample. I really think the possibilities are almost endless, and especially when you think about the fact that it would really be impossible to ever recreate one image twice, because we're talking about images that are created through movement generation. So at this point, this part of the project, we had reached sort of a completion where we had this two-part system. On one side, this t-shirt with sensors, and on the other side, the app. So that was, the system was clear, but I will say still, even though this was already a second iteration of the design and trying new ideas with the sensors, it still was not functioning well enough. Especially the EMG sensors. And that was something that was really important to me to find out, is it really possible to make a functioning garment, or is it just a pipe dream? So I was very excited when the Reframe grant came my way. I heard about it because the Reframe grant offered 10 artists the chance to work with a number of different companies, depending how you applied. And in my case, I applied to work with the Berlin group, and Fraunhofer IZM was the main collaborator in that case. And they were specifically working in this area with flexible wearable technologies. And so I really saw that there could be a chance to make some steps with them. So yeah, I was very fortunate to be chosen for that grant. And here you can see kind of a sampling of some of the things that we did during this almost 1 year process. Lab work on these, monster machines, a lot of experimenting just in how we, developed the different sensor ideas. And then every time we developed new ideas, it was also a matter of testing them with the module to see how they performed. So we finally got to the best design. And it also was a chance to rethink the design of the garment. And this was actually also a huge step, I'd say, because here what you can see is a total rethink of how the garment should be designed. And I will say a lot of it was based on actual discussions with therapists and also with patients to understand what would their preferences be. So here what we did is we separated the technical sleeves and made it as minimal as possible. And then the second layer is really just there for the comfort of the patient. And you can also see that the seams of the sleeves were specially designed. So they're wrapping around the arm and following the paths of the muscle. I have to say I was very lucky throughout this collaboration because, my partners and I were able to understand each other very well. I mean, I think, none of this is my background necessarily, but we were really able to find common ground quite easily. So I think that probably speaks to both of, just the connection itself. But yeah, so that was quite fortunate, and the last part of that collaboration experimentation was connecting the dots. So here you see the final process. Basically, with our final design, which is basically a silver coated knit fabric sandwiched between thermoplastic material that is laminated onto a textile. That we had these custom knit pieces. So there was a slit knit in the fabric. The tail of the sensor came to the front, and then we used a specialized process, also something that was developed at Fraunhofer IZM, this a way to connect the interposer. So it was by using extreme pressure and heat, connecting this interposer to the sensor, and that gave us a way to connect the module. So this was the final outcome of the reframe project. So we had a big improvement with the sensor designs. You can see here the sleeves are shown inside out on the left, of course, just so you can see the sensors. Also, you know, as I mentioned, a totally new design of the sleeves, and as well, this second layer, which was really more about creating a design look for the patient. So, you know, in the end, the project delivered results using, you know, a functioning technology, and delivered to the patient a dignified experience for also the process itself of rehabilitation, but also through, you know, the tools and the clothing to allow them to feel good about themselves throughout the process. And that's it.
Brilliant work. Really nice, Jessica. So questions, people, questions.
It's totally taking a total turn from the last presentation.
We do have Claudia Schnug says, are there next steps you plan to work on concerning design or textiles and technology used? I was asking, are you going to sell this kind of these to the public?
So for next steps, I mean, basically, in terms of designing, that's actually not the hot topic for me. I think the design itself that's what kind of has made like the most steps. What would be, there are still some things that need to be done. And that has to do with more like for example, working with a therapist to ensure that the exercises are actually matching the needs of a patient. So right now, the app kind of shows, you know, some example exercises of, you know, how these different movements can translate, but, you know, what should be done is to create, at least as a beginning, like let's say a 12-step progression of how a patient can, what exercises should be done and how, and what would that feedback look like? And also, you know, working on 2 levels of reports that you can generate. There's 3 levels of report. One is actually the design that's made, and that's really more about this experience. The second level is just kind of these basic percentages to let the patient know if they're doing a little better. And then there's also a chance to create like a, you know, a more comprehensive report. So those are kind of some of the major steps that, and there's a few more, but they're kind of more to do with the, just all of the technical things that you could imagine that come up if you're trying to create a medical device. So am I planning to sell it? You know, at this point, what I've been doing, actually, I took a little bit of a step back, and I've kind of almost taking a little bit of a pause, but at the same time, networking, talking with anyone that, and, you know, and proactively connecting with people, and kind of just having more like conversations. I, you know, have connected recently with someone, this media interaction lab that got in touch with me actually, in Austria. There's someone in University of Delaware who was working with empathetic designs for healthcare. There was someone I had connected with the University of Utrecht here about working on, like, you know, a processing module together. So, I mean, I've had a lot of conversations, and I've kind of been trying to see where can it go, and is there enough of, are there partnerships that I could make in a serious way to take it further? Because that is really important at some point. at what you're talking about, what I'm working on, it's much bigger than one person.
Yeah, great. So there was another question. There's two questions. Deja and Anya had a question, which was, do the exercises get paired with the audio / music? Is it choreographic?
Well, okay, so that's sort of the dream. So right now the movements are generating visual feedback, but so in like midway through the project, we created a film. I created a film with, people that I worked with, a filmmaker, and also hired a sound designer. Because, of course I wanted to bring sound into the film, but I was working with the sound designer to create, progressions in the music that would match the visualizations. And I also just wanted to use the human voice as the instrument. So I really loved working with this person. I think he was super talented. And he basically did just that. He used his voice and then digitally augmented it to create, all kinds of different, chords and melodies, and all in connection to the visualizations that were made from the exercises. So it's not in the app right now, and it's something that I think for me, that would be like the ultimate, if the exercises could generate both these, visualizations and also these, incredible audio soundscapes, which I haven't kind of already thought about how that could work. So it just kind of would need like the funding to do it.
Great. Okay, good to know. And then there was another question here, which said, did anything come up that you did not expect?
I'm sure the answer is yes. Actually, I mean, I really didn't know anything when I started the project. So I think everything was unexpected. I'm not really sure how to answer that. But, I would just say, like, nothing was, besides that, I knew that we needed to make a wearable, and we were going to make an app. It was based on a previous project I had done that created visualization. So that was a starting point. But, most creative processes are unknown from the beginning, and it's all about the process. And, that's also what's interesting about collaborations is, you don't know what's going to come out, and you learn so much from the people you work with, from all of their expertise that has complete influence. So, I mean, basically everything was a surprise.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah, good. There's another question here from Rita Zaki. I hope I've said that right. She says, I hope it's a she, could 3D printing or additive manufacturing be more beneficial as it provides more design freedom to design patient customized devices to enhance the comfort?
I don't know. It was kind of my assumption that textiles would be the most comfortable, solution. So I guess if you have some ideas, then we can discuss it.
Yeah, do you want to say more about that, Rita? Where are you? Are you there still? Are you with us? I see you, but I don't see your face. Okay, well, if there's no response, then we can move on. Anybody else have any other burning questions or things you want to say?
There was one other question from someone saying, how important were discussions and partnerships with clinicians?
With who?
With clinicians.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's hugely important. And I mean, I'd say like throughout the whole 3 years, that was always something that was a top priority for me. And, you know, it's not easy to make relationships with doctors, therapists, and especially patients. It's very hard to connect. So, and, you know, also when you're just starting out, you also don't want to burn bridges by being so early in the process that you're kind of like wasting their time. So, you know, in the beginning, I went the route of trying to contact, you know, university professors and, you know, teachers who maybe had connections who generally are more open-minded to work with, you know, people who are developing ideas. And as I got further along in the process, at some point I had a grant, which was a feasibility study to validate, you know, the business aspects of it. And then really had to put myself out there and, you know, try my best to connect with therapists. And eventually I met a very nice therapist who was very like-minded. And I mean, the whole rehabilitation center, I think, was very nice. Also the director. And that became a very a very good relationship. I learned a lot working with him, but still it was always hard to connect with patients because therapists are so protective of introducing vulnerable patients, you know, which makes sense. But in the end, that's who you most want to hear from because, you know, that's who you're designing for. So yeah, but it's critically important always to be getting that kind of feedback.
Great, fab. Oh, there you are.
Hello.
Hello.
It's a he. Sorry, yeah, I couldn't. After you asked me to show up and ask the question. Well, actually, what I meant by designing or by 3D printing, I meant 3D printing a device that you embed. Those are textiles. I didn't mean like
A 3D device that you embed where?
a textile, right?
In the textile. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, actually, I did work with 3D printing as part of the design. So, so part of that connection towards the end, I was showing that sample where we had to make an interposer connection to the module. And not only do we need to make a connection, we also had to think about how does that module snap on and off from the textile. And for that, I did work with 3D printing to create like a snap function so that the module could snap on and off of the textile. I don't think that's exactly what you're talking about. I don't know. I guess you're asking about 3D printing sensors, like the actual silver conductive sensors. And
maybe yes. Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure if that it is possible. I mean, it is possible to 3D print metallic structures.
Yeah.
Process that can be used, but
I mean, I've seen some things happening out of MIT, which, you know, I'm curious. It's kind of similar to some of the things that I did earlier with the silver printing, but it looks a lot more robust in terms of how they show it. So that could be, it could be a solution. I think there's a lot of people working to find out, you know, what is the best method for these kind of wearable technologies. I will say, like, robustness wise, I do think the solution that we worked with at Fraunhofer is quite a good solution. It's not something that you can, you know, go to your local manufacturer and make. That would be the next step that would need to be made with that technology.
Brilliant. Yes, thanks for the great questions. Anyone else before we're getting close to wrapping up, but we still have some time. We could, you know, open up the floor a little bit more if you want. Anyone? It's also an option if other people want to chime in and say something. We had, I'm sure, other people who've come to this session. Maybe you're just trying to pick up tips, but maybe you're also have something you want to share about your own collaboration process? Anyone? New strategies? We're dwindling. It looks like people are burning out. All right. Well, if we don't have any last questions, I want to thank both of the, well, three of the presenters, both groups, I could say, groups of collaborators. Really, really exciting, interesting, different, but somehow related. They're both somehow related to the body and wearing something, if in a very loose way. But really exciting projects, and really exciting to see how you innovated. Yes, I'm burning out too. And really great to see people show up and support others as well. So this is the point of this community, is to try to share things that we're learning, but also exciting work that we've been producing, and create more collaborations, meet new people, think about new exciting ventures. And strangely enough, we've managed to do some of that better, I think, this year because of the pandemic, because we can reach out further and have people coming from California and other places in the world to join us. I think we had someone joining us for a while from New Zealand and far and beyond. So thank you so much, everybody who stuck it out. It's a bit of a longer session than usual, and we hope to see you at the next session. So just keep watching the starts.eu for upcoming sessions. And if you want to present something that you haven't done so yourself, please just get in touch with us, either Lucy or Orly or any of the team from Starts Ecosystems. And you can find us through starts.eu.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.